time joining me in Codex history is the slab guy, Sal Rowe. And today our special guest is the man we were having a chat with. He is the writer of the West Moon Chronicle, and he is Frank Jun Kim.
Oops, right there. How you doing, buddy?
Good, good. I'm glad to be here, y'all.
Hey, glad
Good.
to have you. So
Thanks.
Frank, a couple months ago we had a one shot, and I asked you about your story of having your first comic book published. And if anybody hasn't checked it out, make sure to go check that out. Our one shot with Frank Jun Kim. Man, it was quite a story with the pandemic and hurricanes and all this stuff. It was quite a journey for you to get your first comic book made, but you did have it made. It came out. There it is, the West Moon Chronicle. But since
Yay!
then, you've been up to quite a bit because you've had more. Then there we go,
Yes,
issue
that's
2,
issue 2. Yeah,
and of course then issue 3.
issue 3.
Nice.
So Frank, since then, obviously we know issues 2 and 3 have come out, but since our first one shot when you had the one issue out, what have you been up to?
Oh man, I feel like I haven't. There's so much. So I completed a pilot script that we then went out and submitted to a bunch of film festivals or screenplay competitions. And so we're waiting to hear how that does. But I'm excited about that because it's a cool. I think it's a cool idea. It's like an alternate universe kind of thing. And I co-wrote it with this woman named Roman Jones, who is awesome. And so we were both people of color, and so we decided to kind of tackle this idea of like, let's use the science fiction trope of an alternate universe to look at what would Earth have been like, or specifically the United States, the North America rather, been like if the slaves overthrew the Confederacy back in the 1800s. Their own. Oh.
You're already getting calls, Frank, about the show.
Yeah. Wow.
That was
Awesome.
fast. People already want to pick up that pilot.
The digital age is just mind-boggling now.
My apologies. My apologies.
No worries, no worries. But yeah, we're just looking at like kind of exploring this idea of like let's look at a society that developed as its own independently led Black nation in what used to be the American South. And so our series kind of looks at that. So we wrote that. That was great. And then after that got sent out, I started just kind of brainstorming another idea that I've been sort of. I've been wanting to write something about gentrification in Austin because I don't know if y'all know, but Austin. If you're a resident of Austin, like the whole gentrification issue is a huge thing because like the city has changed so much in the time that I've lived here since the late 90s, but especially in the last 5 years, like it's been kind of insane how much the city has changed. And so, anyway, I wanted to write about that, and then I came up with this cool idea that involves a martial arts fantasy. So it's I call it my gentrification martial arts fantasy movie, and I'm
Nice.
writing that right now. And then also just been working a lot at like I got hired to edit a science fiction short film, which is really cool. Um, Hopefully that'll come out soon. And oh, man, yeah, just lots of stuff. Just shooting random like projects with friends here and there too. So yeah, sleep has been not
Back burner.
happening as often as I wish, but yeah, but it's good. I'm staying busy.
In those series that you mentioned writing a pilot for, are you looking to just have them as like, let's say, I shouldn't say just, but as a series, or would you also like to see them made into comic book form?
I would love it if it got made into a comic book form. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of open to whatever happens. I think it would make a really cool comic book as well because it is such a visual thing. Like when we show how society is different so the nation is called the Free People's Nation, the FPN. So we're looking at like, okay, well, if people of color didn't have all these boundaries that they do now in society, like economic boundaries, like what would a country like that look like? So we started thinking, and because it's a screenplay, of course, we started thinking very visually. So one of the things that we open up with is this highway, and there's a billboard, and this is all taking place in the 1960s, but again, it's like an alternate history, 1960s. So the civil rights movement isn't even a thing anymore because it doesn't need to be in this country. But anyway, in this, there's an old truck driving down this highway, and on the billboard you see it's a commercial for their version of Coca-Cola. It's a soda, but all the people on the billboard are young black teenagers. And that's something that you never would have seen in the Deep South in the 60s, much less even now, usually. So yeah, we wanted to do little visual things like that, and so I think in a comic book it would definitely translate really well to just kind of like have these like moments that you're like, oh yeah, that's just like life, but a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing I was going to ask, since how you've written, like I said, for films, and also with the West Moon Chronicle, I remember you mentioning like, the difference between a script for a show and a script for a comic book. Is I was going to ask, what are some of the differences between a script for a series and a script for a comic book?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question because I had to learn all of this back in 2021 when I was learning how to write the comic book script for West Moon. Um, there's a few things, I guess. Both of them have to be very visual, of course, because they're both very visual mediums. Screenplays, though, do offer you the chance to include music and sound. And so that's fun to play with because especially with just sounds, like hearing, like describing what a character hears, not just in dialogue, but the sound of a car passing by, or of course, like something dramatic, like a gunshot. Um,
All the
that's
caps.
cool. Yeah, and because you know that in the final product for a screenplay, it'll be an actual sound versus in a comic book script where it's just more like the word that is that sound. What is that? Onomatopoeia? I think is that the term? Something like that.
Not too sure. I have to
Like
learn.
bang, like that's when you have a word that's the actual sound. I forget what that is. Anyway, um, but in this, yeah, so in a screenplay you can say, you can write that, you can actually say like, he's driving and the truck starts making a loud rattling noise, knowing that in the final product they're going to have that sound effect. Um, so I like that. You can also, of course, like put in music. Um, they discourage you normally when you're doing professional screenwriting from naming like specific songs. So you can't say, I want to have Taylor Swift, "You Need to Calm Down" play in this scene, unless you know for a fact you have the budget and that they're going to actually be able to buy the rights to that song. So usually in a screenplay you would say like in this scene there's like soft dance music playing or something, like you kind of keep it generic, but I do like being able to have that freedom in the screenplay to just think about like, oh well, like even if I know I can't have a Taylor Swift song, I'll play it while I'm writing it, and then that'll sometimes help me to inform the scene, and then I'll just put something in there like electropop goes here or whatever. um, the other main difference, though, in screenplays versus comic book scripts is that in a screenplay, one page of a script is equal to 1 minute of screen time, generally speaking. And so, and that's why if you look at a screenplay format, it's formatted in a very specific way. Like the dialogue is like always going to be like a certain amount of text width on a page, and you always have like scene headers and things like that. It's because it's a blueprint for making a movie, and they figured out, after 100 years of making movies, they figured out if you follow this particular format without fail, well, over the average pages of the script, each page will actually average up to 1 minute screen time. In a comic book script, that doesn't matter. So it's actually it was fun for me because I could spend an entire page just describing one panel if I needed to. The artist needed that. And yeah, just go into incredible detail because the artists who were working with me, like they wanted to know more. Like they, as much detail as I could give them about my vision, that helped them to then draw the final panel and the final pages. So that was a lot of fun. Oh, and then the other thing you can do on a comic book script is you can just take pictures or grab images off of Google and put that into the script and just tell the artist, okay, draw this thing. I could just what was it? I took like pictures of like um, uh, alcohol distillery tanks, And then I could just take a picture of that and be like, okay, this is what Junho, the grandfather, has on the side of his house because he brews alcohol for a living. Or I could take a picture of like Korean swords and be like, this is what a traditional Korean sword looks like, which is distinct from a katana or from a Chinese jian. So here you go. And then just change it and make the handle look like this, or put like the blade, like characters on a blade or whatever. So that's really fun. I love being able to just go beyond the page a minute thing and just like go into as much detail as they could possibly stomach. But that helped a lot because then with me and the artist, we were just able to like bounce ideas back and forth. He even told me at one point, since you know martial arts, why don't you go do some of these moves that you're describing in these fight scenes and take pictures of them and then send them to me. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I had my buddy come over and he just took pictures of me doing stuff in the backyard. And then we sent that to him, and that ended up making its way into the comic.
Nice, a little photo shoot you had.
Yeah, over many too, like because the process took about a year to make all 3 issues, and so yeah, he would periodically come back and be like, "What about this?" And I'd be like, "Oh, that's not quite it," and eventually he'd be like, "Okay, take a picture of this thing and send it to me." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So yeah, that's a lot of fun. And then the final difference I think between the types of medium is that in a comic book script, this I don't know. I mean, it's obvious to me now, but I struggled with this so much. But it's that you can't show motion really. There are ways that of course, like you can like people swinging. You can show kind of the arc of the swing or whatever. But like a nod just totally like threw me off. Like, oh, I hear a noise. Do y'all hear that?
It's my dog walking behind me.
Okay,
Oh,
maybe.
yeah. It was like a
Someone's trying to jump in on the
Oh
interview.
yeah, well I got hardwood flooring in my office here, and when she gets up, she likes to move around. So that's what you're hearing. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. What kind of dog do you have?
I got 2 English Springer Spaniels, and the one that likes to hang out with me, she is 12, and her name is Penny.
Oh,
I'll show you after. I'll show you after.
Well, little Penny.
Yep. The younger one is somewhere else in the house. She's like 3 and
so
kind of like hyper.
Yep. Energy, I assume.
Yep, very much.
Nice.
Okay.
Oh, but yeah, I was saying, so I like showing motion. Like, I kept typing in my comic book script. He nods or she nods or shakes their head, and my editor and the artist, had to like gently point out like you can't you can't draw that really. I mean, so it was just little things like that because like in a screenplay, of course, you're describing motion since they're motion pictures or television shows, but yeah, so that was a little thing in my brain that I had to adjust when I was writing the comic book script. And if I did show motion, I would talk to the artists and I remember I grabbed a still from an old Thor comic from like the 90s where he's spinning Mjolnir, and it was like, okay, that kind of motion we can show, like that's fine. But then if it was just something like a character holding a mug of hot chocolate and setting it on the table, you can't. I mean, you could show that, but it's not going to be as effective. And so yeah, it was just kind of like, wow, this is so interesting. Like I just had to make that mental leap, I guess, an adjustment into, okay, how do you like show action in a comic book? So yeah, anyway,
right.
So those are the kind of things I noticed that were different.
I was gonna say, I've seen that in the comic book where it's like the sudden surprise. Like I could see, I remember this because I've seen this so many times in my comic books that I've read, where like the superhero is surprised. So he's going right here, and they have his head drawn like this, like he's focusing somewhere down here. Then something happens, and then they draw another face like sticking out like this, like so he goes like that. So you see kind of like you see like a ghost of an image. As he's still looking here, but you see like a little white swoosh, and then his head's up here, like whatever he's
like
facial expression wise.
Yeah.
Right. So I know exactly what you mean when you're saying that, because that's very hard to do the show almost like instant action.
Exactly.
If it's slow motion, you can like he's swinging the sword down or he's spinning Mjolnir like that. So you can see the motion when you draw the actual hammers out in the circle type.
Yes.
So
exactly.
I think it's the instant action that's the problem to show, because that's very hard to capture in the comic book medium,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know. But
Yeah.
but you described it perfectly, I think.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, it is very interesting how, and like one of the things that Joe, the artist I worked with, that he did was there would be moments with kind of that instant action where he would just break it up into different panels, which I thought was smart. Like in issue one, there's a moment where Junho, they're in the living room, they're talking, and he has a moment where he looks kind of one way thinking, and then he looks a different way, and in a in a film, if we were filming it, we could just have him be like,
Right.
and that's it. But yeah, it just didn't work to do kind of like what you're describing, like that those sort of transitions in that moment. At least it just didn't work for the feel of the of that scene. And so Joe just broke it up into two separate panels, and they were kind of like narrow panels in the
Mm-hmm.
final comic book. So yeah, it's really cool how you just have to sort of like come up with these different solutions to show that kind of action.
Right. Right. I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. Totally agree.
And Frank, how we were just talking about how, writing the difference between writing a script for a series and for a comic book. And, how you got the West Moon Chronicle made was that you said you can't come in second place in the script to comic contest.
Hmm.
So I was going to end it. And yeah, well, that was, we talked about that more on the one shot with you, but how that one issue turned into three. So they're having another contest, the script to comic contest. And I was going to ask, do you have any advice for anybody who's entering that contest?
Um, I would say make sure your story does have a lot of visual elements. Um, if you're because the other thing is they don't just accept screenplays as submissions. They'll accept prose, short stories, or novel. I don't know about novels actually, but I know that they take like prose, shorter prose work. But anyway, if you're writing like too much of internal character thoughts and feelings, that may not translate as well, unless you have some method to show those internal thoughts, like there's like flashbacks, or just something that you can, like, if you can film it or photograph it, then that's good. But yeah, I do see a lot of people who could. I've read as a first round judge for other screenplay competitions, not for script comic, but from that experience, I know that a lot of times people submit stories that just aren't visual enough. And they're trying to write it as a screenplay too, which is funny. But then there's like all this, like these huge chunks of narration, or just really long monologues that don't. Monologues are fine if you're using them judiciously and they move the story forward. But if most of a screenplay is just monologue, then that's it. That's a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, so just make sure if you submit something, it's very visual. They like genre stuff, obviously. So if it's horror, if it's sci-fi or fantasy, that's really good. Scout does publish more kind of like dramatic stuff or comedic stuff that's more grounded in reality. And so you don't discount it if that's what your story is, but just make sure it's still going to be like really exciting. It has a beginning, middle, and end. The story goes somewhere. And then of course it's always about characters. Like that's what they liked about my story when I submitted it, is that it had interesting characters that even because, so for those who haven't read it, it's about primarily a Korean immigrant family, and so they like the fact that even though not everyone is a Korean immigrant, there were things about those characters that they could really relate to, and made them want to see them succeed, or in the case of the villain, want them to fail. But there was something about them, like they weren't just like cookie cutter characters. And that's just very important to me, because I knew, well, just in general, when I write, I want to make characters be interesting, and I think that how people are interesting is that they're never like just one way. If you meet someone at a party and they're like really loud and boisterous, you might think like, oh, that guy's an extrovert, and he's always an extrovert. But often they're not. Like they'll have moments when they're wanting to be more introverted, or or they're like very thoughtful in a way that you never would expect. So I always love like throwing in those little almost like contradictions, but to me they really make someone much more believable because we're all walking contradictions. So
Yeah, like you say, it makes people more realistic instead of just being one way, more
Right.
down to earth.
right,
Yeah, we all have
yeah.
our ups and downs. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I read a little bit of the synopsis on your Moon Chronicle, and I went ahead and ordered the book because they told me. Well, last week when I found out I was going to be doing this interview, of course I did research and I looked into your stuff and I went, wow. I said this looks really interesting to me, and I think what really got me on the hook was the Korean lore.
Mm,
And I love mythology of all types. Greek, Norse, that doesn't matter, Roman, doesn't matter. If you start throwing that into your story, I'm like, I'm suckered in. I'm in. I'm like, yes. So I like that aspect of that of the story, and I hope when I read this, I'm going to get a lot of that lore in your story. So I mean, I think somebody's read it. Have you read it already?
Yep.
Do you see a lot of the
I
lore?
went through all of it. Yep. So you will. Yeah, you will save you.
Okay,
As
so
I was saying,
so
you'll enjoy it. Yeah.
and
maybe I'll do a review of it. Was
and
that
just entice you to the audience hopefully to buy it more so I can continue writing it. I
yeah?
actually have even more lore planned into it if we are able to continue after issue 3, um, because that's when they'll go in more into the alternate Fey realm, the Sky Wild, and
Okay.
they'll there's just a lot more like Korean folklore that's going to be intertwined into that.
Yeah,
So
I like that. I like that. That's very cool. That's very cool.
thanks,
So
thanks.
That was my
I've got
one
it.
thing with this
Oh,
story. Was I was
okay,
gonna say
good.
like I enjoyed it, and I was like, but there needs to be more. I'm like, I want to see more. So I wouldn't really call it a critique, but I'm like, it's a good thing when people want more. So that's my one thing is that I would like more.
Excellent.
But
Yeah, and
so
I even have because I know like at some point people are gonna read and they'll be like, but wait, why are these Korean goblins in a forest in Texas? And just know I have a whole reason. Like, there's a whole thing about how they even got there in the first place. So
Okay,
I,
cool.
I'm able to
Why
explore
is New York City always attacked by aliens? I mean, come on.
it.
there you go. Yeah.
There's always a reason. There's always a
There's
reason.
always a reason.
And that's fine. That's fine. That'll work. Actually, I got two questions for you.
Sure.
My first one is, well, you said this earlier in the conversation that you're submitting to several film festivals. Your screenplay. What's that like? I know there's film festivals out there, but I don't know any of the process. So what's behind that? Do you have like a general overview of that you can tell us?
Sure. Yeah. So the so I'll start by telling you about the Austin Film Festival, AFF, which is they're still taking submissions now. I think until July, if I'm not mistaken. But so and I'm in Austin, and so the Austin Film Festival is like the biggest or one of the biggest ones for screenwriting, particularly because they show movies, of course, and they take film submissions and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But they're known because it's a festival geared towards the craft of screenwriting. And so when you submit a screenplay to that, if it can even get into like the second round, it's a big deal because they get thousands and thousands of submissions every
I
year.
bet. Yeah.
Um, and I think only 20% of those go to the second round, and then of course into the finals it's even fewer. But the process for that is that you basically have a screenplay, and it could be a short, it could be a TV pilot, and a feature. Yeah, I think those are the general ones, and then they kind of break it out into categories like is it horror, is it sci-fi, etc. But you take your screenplay and you have to save it as a PDF, and then you email it, or there's a online form. So then you go and fill it out, and then you have to pay a fee. And so most screenplay competitions, there's a entry fee, and the sooner you get in the lower price it is. If you
Right.
wait closer to the deadline, the price goes up. And so this is kind of a general guideline. Usually it's like $35 when a festival first opens for that year to submit a screenplay. And of course, it depends also on the length of your screenplay. But then by the end of it, you might expect to pay anywhere like close to like 85 to almost $100, depending on the
Wow.
competition. So it's always
Interesting.
better to like get it in sooner. And that's a whole thing too. If for those of you out there who want to like really seriously get into screenplay competitions, it's like write your screenplay as soon as you can. All the competitions have different schedules too, but like just have some screenplays done that are really polished, and then that way when a screenplay competition opens up, you can just submit it as soon as you can, because that'll save you a bunch of money. Because when you start submitting to like 5 competitions, even that cost starts to add up.
Yeah,
Um,
I bet. But
yeah,
let's say I write a screenplay, I could submit that to anyone, any
absolutely.
screenplay going on, as long as I pay the entry fee.
Exactly, yeah. So
Hmm.
if you have the money, like go. That's actually why West Moon. I submitted that to like 10 different competitions back in 2020, and the reason I did that, normally I wouldn't have that much money, but because it cost me like hundreds of dollars when it was all said and done. But the reason I did it is because it was in the middle of the lockdown, and I had gotten that sweet government money for COVID, and none of us had to work at the time, so I don't know. I was just like, well, I have this money. I could just spend it on whatever, or I could like try to further my career. So I'm going to do that. And I just submitted to all these competitions, and then Script Comic was the one that won. But yeah,
Awesome.
so I would say like that's part of the so just have some money set aside to submit to screenplay competitions. Make sure your script is really good. Like have other people that actually know about writing read your script. Get a lot of feedback, incorporate that feedback if you can. Make sure there are no spelling mistakes. Like there's no reason
Yeah,
why English should have spelling mistakes, but man,
yeah,
I I've been a first round judge for the Austin Film Festival for many years, and it's shocking to me how many people they're paying like $85 to submit their screenplay, and
yeah.
there's just like grammatical errors and spelling mistakes and like lack of
Wow.
punctuation. Like that stuff matters. Like you
Yeah,
have the most badass movie idea ever, but if you can't spell, like they're gonna toss it.
yeah,
Um, it's just how it goes. I mean,
yeah. I believe it.
yeah, they
You don't
want
want
like
any
screenwriters
points
that,
against you.
oh yeah,
Like
totally.
Right.
anything.
Like
And with
1 or 2 is fine. You miss a word here and there, they're not going to throw it out because of that. But if it's like consistent throughout your screenplay, they're just not going to take you seriously, because the ultimately the okay. So when you win a competition like Austin Film Festival or like some of the other big ones, the prize, there might be money involved, right? But the real goal of why you want to submit a screenplay to those competitions and get any kind of placement is so that you can then get attention from Hollywood, and someone will be like, hey, I'm a literary agent and I want to represent you, or I'm with a production company and we want to buy your script and turn it into a movie. That's the ultimate goal. And the thing is, those people working at that high of a level, they are not going to want to work with a writer who can't spell or be bothered to use spell check. So
yeah,
like that, it's such an easy thing to fix, but so many people don't go through that step, and it boggles my mind. So if
yeah,
you submit something, run it through spell check over and over until there are no, obviously, like if you have like certain names or whatever, or it's a sci-fi script and you're making up like place names, those won't go through the spell check. But every other like regular sentence should not have
yeah.
spelling mistakes.
I was gonna say, with technology today and the word processing, Word and what
Yeah.
have you, it's like just a click of a button to do a spell check.
It really is,
Exactly.
yeah. And I don't understand why to this day people submit, and like even with Word, and I think Final Draft does this too now. There's the grammar check. So it's not just spelling, it's
Oh
also
yeah.
checked for grammar, which
Hmm.
is so helpful. Um but I don't understand why. I mean, I guess maybe I know with Austin, they do get screenplays from people in other countries who English is not their
Hmm.
first language.
Right.
So I get that, but I still think that if they're going to go to the cost of trying to submit to a top tier festival like that, they should have an native English speaker read their work and help them, because otherwise
Yeah.
they're just throwing their money away. And yeah, I don't get that. So
Yeah.
How many scripts would you say you read? Like I say, for on average, because you said you were judged for the first round. On
mhm.
average, how many scripts do you read per first round? Is it
Yeah,
in hundreds
I
or?
did like a rough estimate. I don't have an exact number, but I had actually gone back and like kind of did a rough calculation, and easily read over 350 screenplays now. I'm actually kind of thinking it's probably closer to 500 because I've been the first round judge for almost 9 years now, and some years I wouldn't read as many, but some years I read the minimum of 110 screenplays um, over the course of that year's competition, and I did that several years. So the Austin Film Festival, just so you know, one of the reasons it's so good for screenwriters is that all of us first round judges, when we get the screenplay for the first time, we have to read it from beginning to end. And if you read bad screenplays, you know how torturous that can be. Because sometimes, I mean, I know on page one if this person knows how to write or not. And so by page one, if I'm reading and they're like, there's nothing, it's just not very well written for a screenplay, I would, my personal preference would be to just throw it away or stop reading it. But they make us read it from beginning to end because they're committed to getting good feedback, quality feedback, back to that writer so that they can improve next time, which I think is very admirable, even as I hate my life as I'm reading a 120-page script that is awful. But I
Yeah.
get it. And so we have to then go through, and there's a whole template that, not really a template, but there's like guidelines, like 5 different areas that you have to rate the screenplay in and give constructive feedback. You can't just write like, oh, these characters suck. No, you have to be like, you consider like, retooling your protagonist, make them have a stronger desire to accomplish something, make your antagonist a better antagonist by making them, reflect where your protagonist is insecure or whatever. Like, just you have to give them that kind of feedback so that they can take it, and hopefully in the future they'll keep that in mind as they write their next project. So so it's a lot of work, but out of doing that, I realized like one of the things they look for really are those kinds of guidelines. Like they want to see a script that has like strong conflict, which is another thing. If you submit to a competition, make sure that there's conflict is like, well, make sure there's conflict to begin with. Because I've read scripts where nothing happened, and I'm just like, why would you do this? Why would you spend 110 pages writing about a character that's just sort of like walking through their life and like everything good happens to them? They always get the girl, they get the money, they whatever, like everything just works out. And like,
Not too interesting.
yeah, I don't understand. Like, is this like wish fulfillment for the writer? I don't know, but yeah, it's surprising how many people write stuff like that. And
Wow.
that's fine if you want to do most other kinds of creative writing, but for scripts, for screenplays, um, conflict is essential because when you watch something on a screen, if you're watching two actors, even if they're just sitting in a room somewhere, if there's no conflict, if they're not disagreeing about something, or better yet, arguing about something, it's going to be super boring for the audience to just sit there and watch that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So that's really important. And yeah, if you're a writer out there thinking about entering a contest, please include lots of conflict.
so Frank, actually, 2 of my stories were in the Austin Film Festival a couple years ago, but 2 of them advanced. But they advanced to the next round. So,
Congratulations.
my pilot for a series about a series, and then my short story off for a day. They both advanced. So, if you were the one who checked it out, hey, it got through. So no problems here. So we're all good. Yeah.
Yeah, see, so you were in the top roughly 20% of all the people that submitted.
Nice.
So, yeah,
Nice.
it
Yeah,
was cool
way
that
to
you
go.
mentioned that because that was the first time
So,
in any contest that I had advanced. So, and then you had said that years ago you had entered that contest too, like you were.
Yes, I've entered it as well. I've only ever gotten to the second round too, because it is notoriously hard
mm,
to do that. Hopefully, my pilot that I just submitted, I hope that goes somewhere. That would be awesome.
Good luck
But
to it.
yeah,
yeah,
it
definitely.
it's really cool though. Is I feel like I grew as a screenwriter from going to submitting to a lot of competitions and getting rejected, because a lot of the other contests will also give you feedback, like Austin does, and some of that feedback was very insightful, and it gave me more to work with in terms of what are they really judging these on. And I could kind of see now better, like, oh yeah, my old scripts, they didn't advance because they might have had a weak conflict, or the themes weren't developed enough. That's another important theme is a thing is having themes in your script. Um, it just adds to like recently. Have you guys seen Beef on Netflix?
I have not. Have you seen
Oh,
Sal?
it's so good.
I've heard a lot of good things about it.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about conflict, like the main conflict there, just like it starts from the first 5 minutes and it just drives the entire series all the way to the end. It's so good. But one of the things they do great is on themes. Like every character, all the main characters have a certain, like a theme that's associated with them that is expressed. They never just outright talk about it. I mean, well, sometimes they'll say things that are funny and it's pointing to their theme. But the brilliance of that show is that you see how the theme actually plays out for each character. So, like, you have a character who's like super independent and they just think they know everything. They're always right about it. And then you see how they're not. Like in their actions and the consequences of their actions, they're proven wrong over and over again. But they still are just convinced like, oh, I'm right, I know better than everyone else how to live my life and how others should live their lives.
And
And
that's how
it's
many people are.
exactly, but they never come out and say I'm wrong. They just show like this character just by degrees gets broken down over time and then realizes just what a crapshoot of a life he's made of himself. um, so anyway, this is just brilliant, and like, yeah, you should definitely do that in your writing, is incorporate themes.
So my question then is on the opposite end of that spectrum. For those people that are writing and hit writer's block or walls all the time, because I would like to be able to write a story from start to finish, and I could picture scenes, I could picture beginning, middle, and end, but then I can't fit them all together, and that's my biggest problem. I start writing it, and then I either go off too much on a tangent, or I skip a lot of detail that I went, oh, I should have added that the main character did this and over here that gives him the reference over here when he's at the end, that type of thing.
Mm.
So what do you recommend for people like that, like that just
Yeah.
can't mesh the story together?
So my question to you then would be, do you outline?
I have, yes, I have, and that's been like my sole source of saving grace is when I outlined and I can remember, oh yeah, I needed to add these points over here in the beginning, and then I got to rework it, and then I just I lose focus on that, and then I forget about it for a while because either it gets too overwhelming or too taxing on me, and I'm like, I got too much stuff going on right now at work. I can't really think about this right now, and then it sits. That type of thing.
Mm, okay. Well, I would say then that what would probably help in that situation is to continue outlining. I think that's essential for screenplay writing. Um, Maybe not as much as, I mean, I've heard for novel writing too, it's very helpful, but I know for screenplays, um, if you don't outline, the problem is exactly what you're describing. Like you'll start writing something and it's going great, but then like it'll just start to diverge just a little bit. And it's interesting, so you want to pursue that, but then after a certain point now you've diverged so much off of where you were going that you have no clue how to even bring it back, because it's like the story's completely changed into a different story at that point. Yeah,
Bingo. That's exactly
yeah,
it. I've hit that wall so many times that I just
right, yeah.
ugh,
And
you
then it's
know.
like, yeah, what exactly? Yeah, it becomes overwhelming. You just throw it away, or you just stop looking at it, and then it just wallows for a long time. So before I write a single page or a single word of dialogue or a single page of the script, I spend most of my time first figuring out what is the fascinating core of my idea. So, like for example, with West Moon, it was going back to that one shot that we did, like standing out in a frozen field in the middle of nowhere in the hill country of Texas, wishing I was dead. I mean, it was such a miserable experience. But like, it got to the point where I looked over and I saw these dead trees, and I thought, oh, that's interesting because going back to Korean mythology, what if those are like dead tokebi? So it's a village of these goblins that were killed somehow. That was like the fascinating core that got me started. But once you have that, you have to develop the characters that support that idea and develop it even more. And so, mainly, like creating character profiles is so essential. Um, there's a lot of different templates out on the internet that you can find, but almost every single good character profile is going to have your whoever your main characters are, their names, what their purpose is. So it could be as simple as, this character is the love interest, right? But and so you start from these sort of broad strokes of like, what is the purpose of this particular main character, and then you drill down with the profile and you look at what's their secret, because all good characters should have some secret. It might come out eventually in the script, or it might not. Sometimes just knowing that a character has a secret, but you never explicitly say what it is in the script, is just enough for your imagination to build out a really fascinating character. So, what's their secret? What's their wound? Like everyone's had a wound at some point, an emotional, traumatic event that happened in their past, maybe even as far back as childhood, that shaped their personality and made them who they are now. And some of these characters are very aspirational, so they'll try to overcome their wound in healthy ways. But a lot of times they don't, and it develops toxic traits in your main characters that fuel conflict. So secrets, wounds, and then what is their conflict? Who is it their main source of conflict with? So that's usually going to be the antagonist. And if you're doing the character profile for the antagonist, you want to look at who they're in conflict with for your protagonist. Because creating what eventually I've heard it called relationship maps. I'm sure there's lots of other terms that other screenwriter gurus use, but the ones that I followed, like what you want to do is create these deep, in-depth character profiles that will then create these relationship maps. And I'm visual, so I like to use what's the feature? Story. It's like story map, I think, in Final Draft, where you can.
Storyboard? That's
What is it?
was it storyboards?
Storyboards, yes. In
Mm-hmm.
Final Draft, where you can just like create like almost like a digital post-it note kind of thing and write down whatever you want, and then like you can draw arrows to other post-it notes. And so I'll do that for my main characters. Like, so if for West Moon, it would be like Sunny. Okay, she's now in conflict with Jason and Jun Ho, but Jun Ho's in conflict with Jason. So you have like these maps, these arrows that kind of like show where they are. So that's one thing. That's another thing. So you develop whatever your fascinating idea is. If you can, the more succinct it is, the better too. But have that, then develop your main character profiles, develop the relationship maps, and then outline. And the outline is, I like it. I know some people hate it, but I love it because it's just kind of freedom to me at that point. I'm not stuck in writing a bunch of pages. The outline is basically just like one or two sentences describing a scene. Um, Jason comes home to Vane. Jason like gets into an argument with his grandfather. So these are just like broad stroke scenes that and at first, you might not even know where in the thing they go. Like, so in a let's say you're writing a feature film, so 90 minutes to 2 hours long. If you have the scene where the grandson comes home after many years and he argues with the grandfather, that could take place in the middle, could take place at the beginning, it might even be at the very end, but you just don't know, and that's fine. All you're doing with the outline initially is you just have these scene ideas fueled by knowing who your characters are, who your main characters are, and at that point you might have a sense of the plot as well. But just knowing that, you could just be like, okay, I know that in the midpoint there has to be something that changes everything, right? Like in basic screenplay structure, your midpoint is usually where something happens that's going to kind of slightly change the trajectory of the story because your main character learned something they didn't know before, and it changes their outlook on things. So whatever that is, like, okay, if I have a really good idea, like, oh, the grandson wasn't the grandson, it was like a shapeshifter, let's say. All right, well, a good place to reveal that would be at the midpoint. Or like maybe they get their goal that they've been striving for, but then they realize the goal isn't actually what they wanted. Things like that. So that's where the outlining is really helpful, because if you know you have to have certain turning points and certain key moments, you can just like start plotting that in. And a lot of times you're just at that point you're just guessing. It's like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. So you might be like, okay, yeah, the grandson's a shapeshifter. Oh, that's good. And you put it in there. And then later, as you have your completed outline, you look at it and you're like, oh, wait, that idea doesn't really work. No, let's throw that out. And it's fine, because you're not committed to all those pages like you're talking about before, where you've written yourself into a hole and now you can't get out of it.
Right.
So yeah, so the outlining is super nice for that. Is you're
Maybe
just
my yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say maybe my outlining is bad then, because I've tried doing that, and maybe I'm not doing a good format. So I'll look it up online and see what I can see.
Well, okay, so then that goes to structure. See, like I love geeking out about this stuff, because
Ah, it's fine. Go
screenplay,
for it. Go for it.
yeah, screenplay writing it's really a craft. It's like like the um, knowing how to build a house. I'm just thinking of this because I have a friend who's a master carpenter, and he and I love talking about this stuff. But any like really uh, detailed skill, anything that requires a lot of effort, there's always some sort of underlying structure that's best for how to go about it. So if you're building a house, like you want to build a strong foundation for the house to rest on. For screenplays, that foundation is what's called the story structure or screenplay structure. Um, and there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but in general, at its most basic, the structure is there to help drive the story from a beginning to rising action to climax and then a resolution. And you can now, I know some people, I have friends actually, I can hear their voice in my head right now that are like, but you don't need to have the climax go to resolution. It can be like an open-ended ambiguous ending. Okay, yes, that's true. Like for example, 2001 A Space Odyssey, which I love, it has a very ambiguous ending. And in a
Sure.
lot of ways it doesn't follow a very tight story structure, so I get that. But in general, like 90% of most media that we watch on streaming or in movie theaters, it's going to have a beginning, middle, and end. And so, yeah, with what you're talking about with the outline, when you build your outline, you want to make sure that the outline is built on the skeleton of that structure, so that the outline is basically like adding the muscles to the bones of it. Um, and so if the skeleton isn't strong or isn't stable, then no matter how much muscle you add to it, it's just going to collapse eventually. So in general, yeah, you want to just have a beginning. You want to have the inciting incident, which is very important. It's some external event that makes your hero have to leave their comfortable life. Like, Gandalf on the door of showing up made Bilbo have to leave his comfortable life in the Shire to go off on his adventure. So whatever that is, it's something external. And then that's the one time in a screenplay usually where your main character is like forced by something or someone else to do something, and then after that all their main choices then have to be driven by the stuff that you discover in the character profile, like their insecurities, their fears, their hopes and dreams, the trauma of their wound from the past, or the secret that they're trying to keep at all costs. Like those things are going to then drive your character to make very specific choices that will then have repercussions with other characters that will then make your character have to make more choices, and it's just like this domino effect. But if you do it right, it's so much fun, because for me at a certain point, I'll like I said, I love outlining and I try to have a really good outline, but I usually leave like the ending a little loose and ambiguous. Like I'll know generally how the story should end, but I leave it loose because I know that in the process of writing the rest of the screenplay, all those characters now they start to take on a life of their own, and they start making choices that will impact the story in ways I couldn't foresee, and so the ending will shift and change and be influenced by that.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a tightrope because, as you pointed out, sometimes it goes off the rails completely, and then you're like, I don't know what to do with this. But the more that you kind of know what that structure is and the outline, even if your character does something completely unexpected, like your main character who's supposed to be your hero, maybe they murder someone in cold blood, and then you're like, whoa, they're not the hero anymore. What just happened here? If you go back to your outline and you know pretty much where the story should go, then you can start to make better adjustments. Like maybe you decide at that point your main character was actually the villain all along. Maybe it's like it's part of the reveal, the surprise twist or whatever, is that they were the bad guy all along. I don't know, but like, having that outline will just give you a much clearer sense of how to sort of wrangle your story, your characters back to where they need to be to then complete the story. But also at the same time, I mean, I say that, and I've had stories that I've written where the ending did change completely, but it was fine because it was a much stronger ending. It was a more impactful ending. So,
Right.
but when you have that outline and those character profiles, like that will save you so much of worry and hitting the writer's block and all that frustration. It's so, I can't tell you the number of times I've opened up my laptop and I was like, oh shit, I don't know what to write. And then I just look at my outline. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to fill in this one scene where this character does this thing. Okay, I'll just start there. Boom, and I'll just start writing. And then now I have several pages in, and I'm like, just I feel happy that I accomplished something.
Right. You get on a roll, and you can lead that to the next idea and the next and the next type of thing.
Exactly. And when I'm writing a screenplay, if I have that outline, I don't have to write in linear order. I don't have to start from page 1 and go all the way to page 100. Sometimes I'll open up that laptop and I'm just not feeling it, so I'll just go through my outline and I'm like, okay, I ended on page 15, but rather than picking up on page 16, I'm very curious about this thing that's happening over here on page 70. I'll just start writing that scene today. Why not? And then just do that. And then
Right.
that might give you insights on how to continue on page 16, or it might just lead you all the way from page 70 to the end of the script at that point. But at least you know that, at the end of the day, you've written something that's still going to be, it'll fit, it's a jigsaw puzzle piece that'll still fit into the greater piece. You didn't just make a whole new puzzle.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so
Very good. Thank you.
Words of wisdom from Frank Jun Kim. And now, Frank, one thing, are you giving some advice? What were some stories or comics or anything that inspired you growing up and even now to this day?
Ooh.
Or just any favorites you got that come to mind?
No, yeah, this is a great question. I went and I started doing I called it my creative genealogy. I started this last year where I just started listing all these books and shows and cartoons I watched from as far back as I can remember, like 3 or 4 years old, to I got it as far as like junior high, I think, because I was curious about that. Like, I wonder what actually influenced me, and one of the things that surprised me is when I was a kid in elementary school, reading the Encyclopedia Brown books. Did you guys ever read those?
I did
Yep.
not.
You
I did. I did. Yep.
They're like the basic premise is it's about a kid. His nickname is Encyclopedia Brown, and he's a kid detective. He's like Sherlock Holmes, and he is like keenly observant of all things. And so when you read in each book, there are like several cases that he solves. And in each case, like someone will like he'll confront someone. He's like, "I heard you stole these sneakers off of this kid, whatever. What do you have to say for yourself?" And the person will be like, "Oh, I didn't steal those Nikes. Like, I don't know what you're talking about." And then Encyclopedia Brown will be like, "How did you know they were Nikes? I didn't say that they were. Only the true, criminal would know that." But it's just stuff like that, and like so you get to solve it as you're reading it. Like he doesn't he'll say that each case will end with like, "Oh, I know who did it," and then it'll stop, and it gives you a chance as a reader to think about it and be like, "Oh, wait, okay, what are the clues? Let me go back and figure it out." So anyway, that like hugely impacted me as a kid because it made me think for the first time that I was ever read anything, like really think about like what do you call it? Reading comprehension. Like it made me apply those skills that I would just hear about in class and then never really take seriously.
I was thinking Spider-Man or Superman, but it's Encyclopedia Brown.
Brown.
Encyclopedia Brown. But yeah, that was more like books. And I guess for comics, I think I might have mentioned this in one shot. I can't remember, but Marvel did I think it was like a limited series called The Beyonder, because
Mhm.
I haven't really seen him mentioned much ever since then. But back in the '80s, yeah, there was a guy who's like, I guess he was a celestial, or he was like the offspring of a celestial, something like that. But he looked human until he started manifesting all these godlike powers, and then like none of the other heroes could stop him, and then he had to eventually like calm down. I guess I don't know. He was having a big freak out moment. It was from what I remember, and he was destroying. He was about to destroy the universe, and then somehow he came to his senses. But I just thought that was really interesting. Like as a little like 8, 9 years old, however old I was when I read that, I never considered the concept of you could just be a normal looking human being, and then they're not. They're like this god in disguise. But the thing that tripped me out was like not even that person knew that. He had forgotten until he was forced to remember. So I thought that was a really cool idea.
So the
Uh,
Beyonder.
yeah, it was just badass. And then of course, yeah, Batman and Superman. Those I mean, I love. Um, I got to see Tim Burton's Batman movie in the movie theater, and it was a mind blowing experience. I was in the second row of this giant screen, and I just remember walking out thinking like, "What just happened here? Like, this is insane. This movie." So
Yeah,
I
it's a
love that.
classic. Yeah,
What's that?
it is a classic. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I still love those. I'm so happy that Michael Keaton's coming back as Batman in the Flash movie. Oh
Yeah.
man. Yeah, to me he's
Yeah, so am I. I'm looking forward to that.
yeah. Love it. Um what else influenced me? Later much later on in life when I was in my 20s, Neil Gaiman's Sandman series, of course, was just great, incredible. Watchmen was great. Um Lately, I've been really influenced. Well, man, Beef just really like made me think I need to step up my writing game because that show is so well written. Oh my god! Um, I just finished the season 3 of The Mandalorian, and I am
Nice.
yeah. Oh, it was great. I know that there are some issues, but like just as pure and cinematic enjoyment, I love that show. And I'm really looking forward to the Ahsoka show. I just saw the trailer that dropped and looked great. So
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
Star Wars. I mean,
Star Wars.
I
Yeah.
know I know lots of issues are going on with Star Wars, but as a franchise, I really like it, even if some of the individual movies and series are not great. And ultimately, man, my dream is to write and direct a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, it would be awesome. That would
Yeah,
be. But
that'd be
good luck
cool.
to you in that dream.
Thank you.
It's a tough one, yeah. But hey, man, if you're able to make it happen, especially now, there's so many shows and so many things with Star
Right.
Wars.
There's so much backlore history now that they're just opening up. It's like a sieve now. It's like, everything's just coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, each character has their own story. So yeah.
And so yeah, there's just the possibilities are endless. And um, it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess. But the fact that they own the digital rights to actors' faces and they can use and even voices with James Earl Jones now, he's recorded a whole archive of audio now that they can just use for Darth Vader. But that's very interesting to me because that means that long after those actors have passed, like unfortunately Carrie Fisher, they can still use their likenesses for Star Wars at least and continue these like stories and develop out some of the back lore of it. Um,
Right.
so it's crazy how like that technology now is able to fuel storytelling possibilities. Yeah, just mind-boggling.
Yeah. And speaking of things
Right.
you're a fan of, we got the slab guy next to us. So, do you have any comic books slabbed? Anything like
Um,
that?
no, because I can never afford it, but I
Same, same.
did actually get one slab for me that I now have, which is the first issue of West Moon Chronicle.
Okay, cool.
Scout very graciously did that, so yeah.
Is that CGC or CBCS?
I don't know actually. Wait, no, wait, sorry. I'm getting confused. Sorry, they didn't slab West Moon. What they did was they slabbed the award that I got, the second place award for
Oh, okay, okay.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, sorry. So that's what they have slab. But I don't know. I don't remember which one it is. I'll have to go back and look which company did it. Um,
Okay.
The reason I got confused is because what they did do with issue one was for Comic Con last year in San Diego, leading up to it, they printed out 100 issues of West Moon, issue number one, with a metal front cover,
Oh
and
yeah.
I've never seen that before with a comic book.
Yep.
So that's one of the ones I have is like the metal cover one, which just is badass to me. I love it.
That is. I
Cool.
have a few that are like that. There are a couple of store exclusive books that I have like that, but I do not have those slab because those I think are. I don't know if they're more money or if they're harder to slab because of the way
Uh,
the slabbing process is. It's like a little vinyl insert, not a vinyl, but a little plastic insert that the book goes into, and then it's encased in the plastic. So
oh,
I don't know if those inserts can actually hold a metal
a metal
because
one.
they actually might tear it. I
Yeah.
think because they aren't
Mm.
sharp enough corners because those things are like almost vacuum sealed into those little, sleeves. I'll call them a sleeve. If you ever seen a top loader for a comic book, it's almost like that. It's a little rigid and it's like almost vacuum sealed. So
Oh,
if the metal of a cover that's metal, it has those sharp edges because every time I've bagged and boarded those type of metal books, they slice right through the bag,
yeah.
easy.
Mm.
So I have to be very careful when I'm putting those in. Sometimes I bought the larger size bags just so it has a little room to maneuver around in the actual bag itself, you know.
Yeah. So I could,
So,
yeah.
but that's a
Hmm.
good point. Maybe I'll find a metal book and try slabbing it and see what happens.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that. Let me know.
Okay. I've got on the Codex Station a slab show that I run with a couple other guys, and we talk about slabs. So I'm gonna try. I think that's a good idea to try.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that
Thank,
episode, Sal.
thank you for that.
Yeah. Don't forget to give us the shout out on there that we got. Yeah, me and Frank helped you get
Yeah,
inspired to do that special episode.
absolutely. Yeah, Will, come on, that'd be great.
Because I bet that would look really cool having the
It would.
metal inside the slab, which the slab already makes everything look cool. So,
Right, right.
huh.
Yeah, it
You,
would. Yeah, it would.
do you know? I'm sure this is like. See, I learned so much about the comic book industry from working on this, but I didn't know that comic book publishers will sometimes sell the metal plates that they use to print the comics. So
Hmm.
Scout actually did that with West Moon. After the issue one was
Nice.
printed, they just took the metal plates, and there's three, like the cyan, one for cyan, one for magenta, and one for blue or
Hmm.
yellow. Um, yeah, and like that's how they make the colors. Well, I had no idea, and like they now are selling that on the Scout website as like collector items, which is also
Right.
cool. Because I got to see one of them, and it was like, wow, this is so neat that this is how they print it. Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
they do that. I've seen that happen. Those are kind of pricey. I don't have any myself,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I have some like not original artwork, but it's no, actually I take that back. I do have some original artwork, but I also have copies of like a comic book page that was done. Like I've got a page from Amazing Spider-Man 300, and it has all the characters on it, but there's no words. You can see the bubbles drawn out, but there's no words in it. But this is
Oh,
like the proof you might say that was used. There was a copy of that I managed to pick up. Looks really cool
nice.
though, but
Yeah,
but yeah, that's all. That's pretty cool.
man.
Hmm.
Very cool. And Frank, one more question I have for you
Sure.
is question: what's next? What is next for Frank Jun Kim,
Yes.
and what is next for the West Moon Chronicle? Are things moving forward with it, with the newer issues?
Well, so not yet with the newer issues. So hopefully, all of you out there will go out and buy a bunch of them, and then that'll convince Scout to make more. But what they are going to do is release the trade paperback version that'll combine all three volumes into one, and
Oh,
it'll be
cool, nice.
distributed by Simon and Schuster. So it should be in Barnes and Noble and all the major bookstores and all that. And that I don't know when that's coming out. I know that I think June was talked about, but then they had to push it back for whatever reason. So hopefully this summer at some point. But yeah, so that'll be coming out, and then for me personally, right now I'm working on this gentrification martial arts fantasy. So that'll be
Cool.
fun. And we're my writing partner and I are writing that to be able to be shot cheaply so that we can just do it on our own instead of trying to find a production company to come in and fund it. we'll probably actually end up doing a crowdfunding campaign initially and raise the
Okay.
funds that way. But yeah, the goal, I have a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, and so I know I have that gear. I have sound recording stuff, and so yeah, at some point I think we'll just go out into the streets of Austin and start filming. And
That was cool.
thanks. I'm really
You should-
excited about that.
Sure
I'm hoping
thing.
to work with a really cool stunt team here in Austin too. I'm going to meet with them tomorrow. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Um, and yeah, so if they're on board, we're gonna have some cool martial arts fight scenes and some action stuff. So yeah, I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, so keep
That's
up to, yeah.
cool.
Make sure to watch whenever it's made. I know it takes a long time to make something, but hey, we'll keep in touch. I'll make sure to check it out. So
For
definitely
sure.
good luck to you with all of that.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thanks. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on here. This has been great.
No, it has been. Has it been great having you here and chatting with you, asking your questions, getting some good old advice. Yeah, I feel like we've learned quite a bit today. Yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
has been good.
I think this episode has shown what a humongous screenwriting nerd I am. So yeah.
We're all storytellers, and it's good.
Hey,
The,
there's
the
nothing
guys
wrong with that at all.
they hear me talking about it enough, so it's nice that we get to hear somebody else talk a little bit about screenwriting.
Right
So
on.
all good, man. Well, from one screenwriter to another, it's good to hear it and hear different things in that too. To know that you went from screenwriting also to writing comics, that you do it all, man. Yeah,
I try. Whatever will get the best story out, I'm all about that. So
yeah. In the
yeah,
end, to
Cool.
being a storyteller.
I can't
exactly.
wait to get my hands on your issues, man. I want to read that Moon
Yeah,
Chronicle, man.
yeah.
I
Let
can't.
me know what you think. I'd love to
I
hear
will.
thoughts
I
and
will.
comments.
And I'm the type of guy that gets what's all the individual issues. I'm not a trade paperback guy. I'm not an omnibus guy. I need the individual issues.
Nice.
You know. And if
Yeah.
I ever and here's a little bit of thing on me that when I have something like a story arc that I really like, and it's a lot of issues, I'll get the issues. But if I want to read it like on vacation or something like that, I'll order it digitally and have it on my device, and then I can just read through it anytime I want. So
Yeah.
that's what I like doing for like vacations and long road trips or whatever and stuff like that. But collecting wise, I gotta have the individual issues.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, well, then that lets you have all the individual covers also, which is great.
Yes.
So
Yep. Definitely. If I could send them to you, can you sign them for me?
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
Totally.
awesome. That's what I like. I like.
Um, oh, and I just want to give a quick shout out to for my comics, the artist Joe Bocardo, the colorist Manoli Martinez, and the letterer El Torres. They are awesome. I'm so lucky that I got to work with them, because you'll see in the art when you get it, Sal, that they just did just amazing kick-ass job. I
Cool.
mean,
I can't wait. That sounds
yeah,
awesome.
like I not only do I want to write more, but I want to be able to make more of the comics so that I can work with them again, because they're just brilliant.
Awesome.
Yeah. So everyone, yeah, make sure to check it out. The West Moon Chronicle issues 1 through 3 are available now. And as someone who's read the whole thing, I definitely recommend it. It's an awesome story, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully, like Frank was saying, get out there, buy those issues so that the story can continue, because I want to see it continue. I want more.
Yeah, go buy them right now. Um,
Yes.
Do it. Do it
oh,
now.
and also shout out to my editor.
Yeah.
Yes, Andrea. He was my editor on the West Moon Chronicle, and he's why there were no spelling mistakes in the comic book. So, but no, he did a lot more than that too. He was awesome. So thanks.
Nice.
Very good.
So before we let you go, Frank, any social handles, anywhere you'd like to tell people to follow you, check out your work, anywhere?
Sure. I'm on Instagram at Frank Jun Kim. So Frank Junkim. And I'm also on Twitter there. So with that same handle. So
Very
yeah,
cool.
Well, yeah, go follow
check it
Frank.
out. You can see some goofy pictures I take of myself and my life, and the dog that I live with, and the cat. So yeah.
Well, what type of dog do you have? Since we shared dogs already.
Oh yeah, and it's not mine. It's actually my roommate's, but she's gone a lot, so I end up taking care of them most of the time. And but yeah, there's Maddie, who's a pit bull. She's great. And then there's an old cat, Lord Greystoke, but we just all call him Kitty. I don't know what kind
Orange
of cat.
Greystoke.
I'm not as familiar with the cat breeds, but he's nice. He's very vocal. He likes to meow a lot. Um,
Lets you know he's
Okay.
Lord. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like he's like the equivalent of like a Victorian actor or Elizabethan actor giving like a Shakespearean monologue, because he just like he's not even hungry or anything. You know, I'll check his food and water. He's good there. He just likes to come outside and just start meowing and just talking
Yeah.
for
What's the attention?
long stretches. He
Nice.
might
The
be
name
telling me
fits.
the secrets of the universe, and I just can't understand him. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, everybody,
Awesome.
make sure to check out everything in the Codex Station. We have a website, thecodexstation.com. You can find us on all the social handles. Our sponsor is Dubby. Make sure to type in that code hyphen X for 10% off. The Codex Station also has a nice Patreon. You can help us out for $3 or $7. You get a lot of behind the scenes stuff. You get a whole bunch of
Yep.
things from us. There's that Patreon right by Sale.
There you go. Just click that.
With your
There you go. With
phone.
your smartphone. Mm-hmm.
Help us grow this channel so we can get more great interviews with comic book creators like Frank and many others along the way. And make sure to like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. You can find us everywhere. I am the host of today's special presentation, Sonny Kruger. I'm joined by Sal the Slab Guy, Rowe, and our special guest today was Frank Jun Kim. So take care, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.